Hey, good morning, everybody, and welcome back. I'm Mike, and this is the Mike Drop Show. This is where we bring clarity and structure to real estate and a financial strategy. I'm here every Wednesday at 7:30 Pacific, 9:30 Central. So yes, it's early here on the West Coast, but we take a closer look at the framework that actually works for real estate investors in real estate projects and help you take a closer, deeper look at your own business, your own structure. But let me ask you a question. If you want to actually answer it in your head before I keep going, and actually, if you're driving, maybe you want to pull over and listen to this episode today and take some notes. If you had to sell your deal today or this week, what would happen? And I don't mean in 5 years from now. I don't mean after you do all the value add, after you change the operations, not after rates come down, but today. If you can't answer that question in one sentence, you don't have an investment. You have hope. And today's episode is about the difference between those two things. Everybody falls in love with the deal, right? Everybody falls in love in the beginning. Here's what I've watched for 30 years. You find that property, you fall in love with it, you buy that deal, you're in love, and then all of a sudden it wears off. The buy is the exciting part, the hunt, the LOI, the negotiation, the wire, the photos, the due diligence, the walking the deal, the raising the capital. Nobody posts on social media about their exit assumptions, though. Nobody posts on social media what they think the end is going to be like. But here's the truth. And if you only write one thing down today, write this down. You don't make money when you buy. You make money when you exit. You realize the money when you exit. Everything before that is just a number on paper. And you need to be prepared for that. Paper equity is not wealth. Paper equity is a story, sometimes a great story. Sometimes if you're a passive investor, you bought into somebody else's great story, but that wasn't what the future held. The exit is where the story either becomes true or it doesn't become true. And yet the exit is the part most investors spend the least amount of time planning. I wrote a book called Exit Plan. Investors spend 90 days on the due diligence for the purchase and about 90 seconds on how they're going to get out. That's backwards, completely backwards. I wrote the book Exit Plan, and I'll be honest with you about why I wrote it. I wrote it in blood. Most of you know my story. For those who don't, the short version, I built a private equity firm starting back in 2005. I raised $18 million. I bought 4,000 apartments, $60 million worth of multifamily real estate in 5 different markets. I built a property management company managing 7,500 units. But here's the question nobody asked me. And worse, the question I never asked myself. What happens if you can't get out? What happens if you can't sell the deal where you want to sell the deal? One thing about Exit Plan that I always tell people is, listen, before you ever get to the closing table to buy that deal, you need to know what your exit plan is. You need to know exactly how you're going to get there, what that strategy is. How do you build it? The underwriting is your roadmap to the exit. And if you don't have the underwriting tightened up and you're not adjusting it, you're not looking at it, and you don't have a working underwriting model, you don't have a deal. I had a buying strategy. I had a raising capital strategy. I had a growth strategy. I didn't have an exit strategy, not a real one anyhow. not one that had been stress tested against the markets, against the stops and the things that were cooperating and not cooperating. You know what? And then 2008 happened. Credit froze, occupancies dropped, values dropped, lenders loved me in 2007, wouldn't return my calls in 2009 and 2010. You know what? Uh, it got ugly. The refinance, the sale, the recapitalization, every door closed at the same time. And when all your exits close at once, you find out what you're really standing on. Is it sand or is it concrete? I made a bad decision under that pressure. I own I own that today. The market created the pressure, but I chose the response. The company imploded, and you know what? I got sentenced to federal prison for 10 years. Now, I don't tell that story for sympathy. I tell you that because I want you to understand something. An exit plan isn't a financial document, it's a pressure management system. Think about that. Matter of fact, write that down. An exit plan isn't a financial document, it's a pressure management system. It's the thing that lets you make honest decisions in a bad market because you already decided back when you were calm what you would do. You know what? The investors with no exit plan make decisions out of fear. They operate out of fear. I know exactly where the road ends. I lived at the end of that road for a decade. All right, let's get practical before we go any further here this morning. Okay, here's how I coach investors. I build an exit plan and notice the timing before they ever sign a purchase agreement. The exit plan gets built during the underwriting. So what I was saying, that underwriting tool is your roadmap to your exit plan, not during the hold. You have to look at the things like rent growth. You have to look at your exit cap rate, your construction planning, your return on capital from the construction money you put in, what the investors' returns are going to be. You need to be able to tell that story, all those fundamentals. Remember, when you buy multifamily, you're buying a business, and nobody buys a business without knowing how they're going to get their money back out of it. 5 pieces. Write this down. Number 1, underwrite the exit, not just the entry. Before you ever even get to closing, make sure you have an exit plan. What's your exit cap? And here's the discipline. Your exit cap rate should be higher than your entry cap rate. If you're buying a 5 and your model only works at a 5, you're gambling. Be conservative. Conservative rent growth, conservative expense growth, conservative exit caps. If the deal only works with aggressive assumptions, the deal doesn't work, right? Number 2, know the numbers before your buyer. What NOI do you need to exit at for this deal to hit the return targets? And is that realistic? And what happens if you don't get the rent growth or you can't purchase the property? Does it still work under that stress? Work backwards. The numbers tell you exactly what the business plan has to produce. How much rent growth, how much expense reduction, how many units renovated, how fast you're renovating those units. Hey, listen, we had a deal that we thought, oh, you know what? Let's just go in and renovate all the units in the first 2 quarters, and we'll be able to get back on track, fill those units up, get the rents raised quicker than we originally anticipated. Wrong. Don't do that, because there are things called loan covenants in your documents. And if you don't know what those are, you need to reach out to me and let's have a conversation about loan covenants. Because when you fall outside of loan covenants and your lender calls your loan due or puts you in a lockbox, now the whole world changes for you. And these are things that you really need to be aware of. So number 3, Build 3 exits, not just one. You know what? There's multiple types of exits. You can recapitalize, you can liquidate, you can bring new investors in. There's different things that you can do. You can resell that deal to yourself. A single exit is a single point of failure. I want you to have 3 doors that you could walk through before you ever get to the closing table. The sale, the market's good, the business plan worked, you sell, you distribute. Everything is good, everybody works together, everybody loves each other. But you know what? If the market changes a little bit, how's that hold up under pressure? The refinance strategy, the market's soft for sellers, but the property's performing. You refinance, you return some capital to investors and hold through another cycle. You know what? There's multiple ways of structuring your exit. Are you looking at those before you ever get to closing? Number 4, match your debt to your exit. This is where deals actually die, not at the property level, but at the debt level. If your business plan is a 3-year value add and with a sale, and you take a loan with a maturity in year 3 and no extension options, you have built a time bomb into your own deal. You're focusing yourself or forcing yourself into an exit that is unrealistic. Your loan terms should outlive the business plan with room to spare. And you know what? When we get into talking about loans and loan terms, I do not like anything other than a term loan, right? I don't care what kind of a deal you're doing, bridge debt, floating rate debt. I have never been a fan of those. They tend to get you in trouble. And look at the market today and look at some of the deals in the market. That's why I like deals that are fixed rate debt and where every morning when you get out of bed that your mortgage payment is the same and it's not changing. Doesn't that seem to bring a little less stress to your life? All right, and number 5, decide your triggers in advance. You know what? Don't wait for the storm to show up before you decide. Write it down now. What's the DSCR have to be at purchase, at sale? What's the occupancy have to be? What changes do we need to make in management? What construction planning do we need to do? What if we can't get contractors at this price or material at this price? The last one matters most: transparency. Being transparent with your investors, being transparent with the people that trust you. This is what's most important. So now that you've been listening, uh, you know, are you a passive investor or are you an operator? Are you placing capital in other people's deals or are you doing your own deals? Either way, these are all points that you should know. This episode is just as much for either one of those groups of people, not one or more, but both groups of people. Because when you vet a sponsor as a passive investor, when you vet a deal as an active investor, the exit plan is the X-ray. So, what's your exit cap assumption, and why is it higher than the entry cap? What happens if you can't sell in 3 years, 5 years, 2 years? Show me the second exit plan. Show me the third exit plan. And then show me how you're going to finalize that deal. When does your debt mature? That's something you really need to look at. You know what? Why are you pre-committed to triggers that might not ever happen? It's like we worry about things that might not ever come true, right? So here's what those questions really test. They test a sponsor who has real answers, has thought about projecting what's going to happen with your capital if you're a passive investor in a bad market, in a good market. A sponsor who gets uncomfortable, who wavers off of those answers, probably is not somebody to talk with. You know what? We'll figure it out on the way is not an answer, right? You have to have solid responses and solid answers. That's where you get the trust of your investors, and build your personality, build your business, helps you build your platform. Passive doesn't mean inactive. So if you're a passive investor, don't think that you're just going to collect mailbox money, because as much as you want to, there's still the work that you need to put in. So don't be inactive. All right, let me bring this plane in for a landing this morning. You know what? I've controlled over $200 million in real estate across my career. I've had some of the most expensive lessons that anybody could have, and some lessons that most people would never want to have. Uh, I can tell you what was a good deal, what was a bad deal. You know what? It's all been a learning experience, and it's all been a learning experience for you, because now I have something to share with you to help you grow, right? There's always another 2008 coming. There's always another recession coming, right? It's just when. And I'm not saying this to scare you. I'm saying this to build, that you build it and you build it properly. Because when the lights come on and investors are left standing, no one knows who's bought the best deal. There's the ones who plan the exit before they ever walk through the entrance. That's who bought the best deal. The buy, the acquisition is the beginning of the deal. The exit is the point of the deal. Never confuse the two. You know what? If this hits you today, 3 things you could do. One is subscribe here to the Mic Drop Show, because this is the kind of conversations we have every week, where we bring some clarity and realism to the business. Send this episode to one person who's about to buy something or invest in a deal. You know exactly who they are. And if you want to go deeper, grab my book, Multifamily Investment Secrets. You can go to multifamilyinvestmentsecrets.com and grab a copy. Come and join me inside for a free masterclass where I walk through the full underwriting from underwriting to exit, the framework, the step-by-step. I'll post a link in the comments below. You know what? If you want help building your portfolio with the systems and the accountability that I've built over 30 years, that I didn't have the coaching, but got the coaching that I needed, not only from a coach, but from practical experience, the door's wide open for you. And I'd love to help you. You know what? That's all for today's episode. But remember, the Mic Drop Show, we're here every Wednesday. So join us. Tell somebody else, be here. Grab your coffee. But you know what? Understanding is just the first step. Action's the second step. And remember always that structure is what keeps you safe. Hey, I'm Mike Morawski. This is the Mic Drop Show. We'll see you next week on Wednesday. Everybody have a great week. If I can help you with anything, don't hesitate to reach out. And I certainly will look forward to seeing you somewhere soon in the future.